This show is about oil, and it's about wind. It is exciting and very scary to be alive in a period of great transformation. How did we come to this crossroads? Well, here is a 4.5 billion year history of oil. Over the millennia, the plankton, dead, and all the dead animals and the dead plants filtered to the bottom of the ocean and lay in heaps, and sediment settled on that dead material, that organic material, and cooked by pressure and the heat from the center of the earth over millions and millions of years was hydrocarbons, oil and gas. In the 1800s, Eastern Europeans were hand-digging trenches, getting the seepages from that oil out. They wished to refine it into kerosene, which they burned to push back the night with a clear light. Colonel Drake in 1859 arrived in a stovepipe hat. He began drilling into the seepages, and then oil started flowing out, and in one day we doubled the oil supply. John D. Rockefeller hated the boom and bust of the oil industry. He was determined to eliminate all unbridled competition. It just caused waste. With one refinery with this name, Standard Oil, he decided that he would convince his customers that his kerosene was a safe light and would never explode. Take that sample back to the labs, boys. Now, at this first sign of bust, he started buying out other refiners. He would do it sweetly at first, but if they refused, then he would turn to his men and say, "Give him a good sweating, boys." After 20 years, he owned 90% of the refineries in America and had started the world's first multinational corporation. In 1911, Winston Churchill was addressing Parliament. He insisted that the Royal Navy be converted from coal to oil. Makes the ship speedier, he said, and more powerful. The Jerry prepares for war. The English prepare for war. At the end of the war, the British, among the victors, carved up Mesopotamia and turned it into Iraq, installed King Faisal to lead. It was now quite apparent that in order to have international power, oil was absolutely essential. Meanwhile, back in the US, Henry is cranking out a car every 93 minutes. There was more call for oil. So the US government went to the British and insisted that we be included in on their oil plans for Iraq. Now, isn't that interesting? Ever since 1927, we and the British have been in Iraq extracting their oil. Just something to think about. We've got oil coming out of Texas, Oklahoma, Mexico, Venezuela, and now Iraq. What are we gonna do? Filling station. Ladies and gentlemen, Los Angeles had the quintessential filling station where they had 8, gentlemen, count them, 8 separate pumps covered by canopies. By 1929, shortly before the stock market crash, we had 143,000 gas stations in America. Then, Japan invaded Indochina. They were after their oil. The Dutch, the British, the Americans moved into a vast oil embargo, frustrating the Japanese. The Japanese, very frustrated, bombed Pearl Harbor in retaliation, and America entered World War II. We supplied much of the oil of the Allied effort. After this conflict, it was Exxon, Chevron, Mobil, and Texaco that moved in to Saudi Arabia. They began drilling for oil and began extracting it and sending it out to the world and US economies. So important was this oil for the U.S. economy that every U.S. president, from FDR to the present, has pledged and delivered unrelenting support and protection for the Saudi monarchy. This oil from the rich, vast reserves of the Middle East spawned suburbia. There were interstate highways stretching from coast to coast. Stay in a Holiday Inn, luxury lodging for the middle class. Hey, what's this? Hey, chop the music! We're out of oil here! What's going on? There's no oil! We gotta go back to the Middle East, find out what's happening. 1951 in the Middle East. Iran nationalizes British Petroleum, chops the supply of oil off to the West. 1956, President Nasser of Egypt closes the canal. He nationalizes it. He wants all the revenues from the canal to feed his people. 1967, the 6 Days War, and the Suez Canal is closed again. 1973, the Yom Kippur War. For the first time, the Arab states use oil as a political weapon, and the price of oil goes from $2.90 a barrel, skyrocketing up to $11.65. Oh man, we're gonna have to pay some more for this stuff. Then vans, Jeeps, SUVs. What now? Not again! No oil! Let's go see what's happening. Back in the Middle East, 1979, the Shah is out, the Ayatollah is in. Oil panic. Oil shoots from $13 a barrel up to $34 a barrel. 1992, the Gulf War. Saddam Hussein sets fire to the oil fields of Iraq. Now, 2002, it's the Iraq War. The war continues. The life loss mounts, as does our debt. We have world peak oil, which means that the supplies are diminishing. The demand is growing, and with it, the potential for violence as we fight over the remains. Here we are at the crossroads. Now, there's a new way, a new path. Down that path is great news. Down that path is a wind turbine. This wind turbine can work at night while people are sleeping, and thus we could take a new generation of gas-electric hybrid cars, plug them in, and recharge the batteries. What if we were the ones that brought an end to war for oil, forged a new era of energy from the sun, the wind, the heat of the earth, that brought respect to our earth and all her communities of life? I deeply believe that we are the leaders we've been waiting for.
Remember.